Stand up, I am standing up. That's the first time I've... Yeah. Lower everything. Accept your expectations because we're in recovery. Welcome to all of you. My name is Paul Williams. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic. And an addict, but that's kind of like saying you're from New York, New York. You don't, you know. But I know we have people here from a variety of groups, and I'd like to think that I tried to dabble at every, I'd almost qualify for every program. I never really got into gambling because I didn't want to waste perfectly good drug money, So, my God, that would have been an 8-ball. Wait a minute, come here, can we talk? My sobriety date is March 15th, 1990. My sponsor's name is Mac M. He is a double winner, very active in both Al-Anon and AA programs. I'm living happily in 10, 11, and 12. Well, mostly happily, Every now and then the rats get to chewing on the wire and I start screwing up a little bit. But basically I have a program, I have principles, and I have traditions to return to that make my life better. I haven't had a drink in 21 years. The world is a safer place, Yeah. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the 12-step program. I do qualify in a batch of them. I will tell you that I have a God-shaped hole in the center of my chest, and I did my best to fill it with a variety of things, ranging from relationships and ladies and jobs and career and alcohol and other drugs, because there is somewhere at the core of my being, there is a little guy that gets scared, and the two things that he does to cover that scared up with are get cocky and get loud. If you add alcohol to the mix when I'm in fear, you have to add lying, because around my alcohol, around my drinking and using, and to hide who I think I actually was, I became a chronic and habitual liar. If you talk to Paul Williams when he was drinking, it was amazing. I was a pilot. I wasn't a pilot. Are you kidding? And it's funny. You try to talk to somebody that isn't in recovery, and you try to explain what it's like when your life is turning out so badly, and why didn't you just quit? Why didn't you just quit, little guy? Why'd you keep on drinking if you go to, I assume it wasn't really good there at the end. I said, no, when I drank, it led to unplanned nudity, And said, look, why didn't you just quit, little guy? I said, there's something in me that doesn't allow me to do that. I want more. And the best example I've ever found is you can talk to somebody that's a normie, quote-unquote normie. If there is such a thing, we're all special and unique creatures of the Lord, in my opinion. But you talk to somebody that's never had a problem with drugs and alcohol, and here's a question to ask them. If you wake them up in the middle of the night, call them at 3 a.m, and they answer the phone, hello, you say, did I wake you? 99.9% of those wonderful, religious, righteous, upright people will lie through their teeth and say, no, that's all right. And I say, well, why the hell do you think that you do that? And they said, well, I don't know. I said, well, I don't know why I became a drunk either, but the fact is that I found something to do about it. My home group is Lucky 13 in Sunset Beach, California. And we sit in a circle on the sand. It's a fabulous meeting. The dolphins go. It's on the beach. The dolphins going by are our primary porpoises, and it's just awful, isn't it? It's just awful. And I love this program, and I love the people that I've met in the program. I have found that the people that you meet in Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or Al-Anon or any of the 12-step programs, the people that have committed to this way of life, you find something that is just, I can't even explain it to somebody, but there's something magical that happens when you walk into a room full of people you don't know and have that moment of blatant honesty where you turn to another human being and you say, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm scared to death and I need help. And I have to tell you, I get all Jiminy Cricket about that, because that is the most special, wondrous moment when you're sitting at a meeting. And you know what? I don't bring the sweetest and nicest and brightest guy to an AA meeting. When I stumble into a meeting, it's usually I'm like, get the damn wheelchair out of my way. I got to go to a meeting, you know. Put me behind the wheel of a car, and I can turn into a righteous little bastard, you know. If the rats get to chewing on the wires, I get a little busy-headed and all, and I sit down at this circle of people, and I go, well, she's going to talk about her daughter again. You know. He's going to say, why don't you let your son bottom out? Maybe you won't be sending him money all the time, you know. And that's going on in my head, and I don't know when it happens or why it happens. Maybe it's that magical moment when they say, are there any other alcoholics present? We all raise our hands. There is a moment there when that happens, when I get a different kind of breath. And it's free of a certain kind of anxiety that's probably fear-based. But I'm sitting in that room, and we're going around, and all of a sudden, something has happened, and I have found that quiet place of comfort where I know I'm safe. So I think that I carry any anger that I carry into a room is probably fear-based. That's basically what's going on. And the next thing I know, I'm just there, and I'm just sitting there. And I have to tell you, that is an amazing thing for me. When I was about 7 months sober, I was like sitting in a meeting, and I went, something is weird. Something is weird. What is going on? And I realized that nothing was moving. I was just sitting there. I got to tell you, when I arrived at AA, my first few meetings, for the first few months, I looked like a damn parrot, you know. Yeah. Happy, joyous, and free, right? Happy, joyous, and free. Yeah, you know, just, you know, because I had a big nose and a big cocaine habit and a lot of amphetamines and everything. And that stuff comes out of your system a little slow, and the thinking changes even slower and all. My sponsor was a guy named Jerry Hunter, who passed away a few years ago. Jerry Hunter was about my size, just a little bit bigger. He looked like Yosemite Sam, and he rode a motorcycle that was too big for him, so he could never put both feet on the ground at the same time. So he would go back and forth like this while he was talking to me. And, of course, I was going like this. And, you know, it was like an unsquare square dance. If we could just, and every now and then he'd reach out and grab me and he'd say, let's try to line this up, you know, if we could just go together, you know. Sweetest man in the world, sweetest, dearest man in the world. He loved AA. He always had some kid on the back of that motorcycle. And he died a few years ago because he couldn't quit smoking. But he was a key element of my life. And when I found, and he was a driver. He had a limo company. So he'd pick me up, and I remember the first thing he ever said to me was, whoever landed that plane was drunk. And I said, I was not, you know. Because he was there when I landed a plane, because I had talked the pilot into believing that I was this little twin Cessna I could land, you know. So we met as I was lying to him, you know. As a matter of fact, the guy took the wheel, the yoke away from me right at the last minute to keep from all of us dying and everything, and going, you're not a pilot and everything. So, but I'm still lying to Jerry. And Jerry, I asked him if he wanted to have something to drink, and he said, not today. Not today. And he was just the dearest man ever you'd want to meet. But I was born in a household and raised in a household where alcohol was the reward for a hard day's work. My dad was in construction, and he was a major drinker, you know. 6'2", both my brothers are 6'2". I have a mild resentment we're still working on. There are a couple things I want to say before I get on with my pitch that I always say that is key to this thing. You know, the fact is, look at this. Think of, you know, come on, are you feeling your age? Come on. This is, you know, it's just good. All right. So anyway, I'm in show business, you know. Boy, if that's not a visual representation of the 80s for me, then nothing was, you know. There, fall down to me now, you know. But there's something I want to say. This is being recorded, and I'm now talking to whoever's listening to this CD or this MP3 or whatever device you're listening to me babble about recovery on. I want to say something to you. You know, sometimes somebody that is in the newspaper business, or somebody in the press, will get their hands on a speaker tape. And I want to say something make something really clear. My name is Paul Williams, and I am a very grateful recovering alcoholic, and I am proud of the life that I have today in recovery, and I will do anything I can to pass that on. And you can write about me being sober. There's only one thing I ask of you. Please do not use the words Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, any anonymous program. Do not print it next to my name, because if you do that, you violate a tradition that I've lived by for 21 years. And what part of the greatest deal I've ever found includes an 11th tradition, which states that at a level of press, radio, and film, and music video, we are anonymous. So now let me address that to you, person sitting there with your pen, wondering what you're going to write next. The fact is that there's a reason for that. The reason for that is if you print that Paul Williams is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then I wind up face down on my own vomit drunk somewhere, people will go, well, I thought he was an AA. That there AA must not work. Well, the fact is that there AA saved my bacon, saved my little white perfect butt, and it works beautifully if I continue to do what I've been doing the last few years, and for which I am immensely grateful. But that's the end of my pitch. Just please honor our tradition and don't mention AA if you write about any of this or whatever. You may applaud. Thank you. And that is not applause for me. That is applause for a tradition that is spectacular. You know, I do this a lot. I speak a bunch, and you're about to be really disappointed, because it's basically white bread, and it's like a tuna fish sandwich. It's just an American drunk-a-log and all. I never came out of a blackout with a Russian arms dealer. Never came out of a blackout with Norman Mailer and a couple of hookers in Paris. I come out of a blackout at the boys' department of Sears, trying on sweaters, or, being fitted for a portly cadet suit, But I love AA. I love what it has given me. It's the most spectacular thing that's ever happened to me. As I said, my dad was a big drinker. My dad was in construction. I went to 9 schools by the time I was in the 9th grade. And I was always the new kid in school. I was also always the littlest kid in school. And that's what I sounded like when I was in high school, I was short. I was slower growing than my brothers had been, so they gave me shots to try to make me grow. And they gave me male hormone, and what it did is it closed off the bones, so I actually stopped growing then. And for a while, all I wanted was to look down my mom's friends' blouses. It was like they were giving me a lot of male hormone, and things were really interesting all of a sudden, Yes, Mrs. Johnson, did you drop this? Yeah. But so I was this little kid who was different, and different's hard, and different is difficult, and different is scary. My dad drank. My dad, I believe, was an alcoholic, but he never had the freedom of that spectacular moment when you reach out to another human being and you say, you know what, I think I may be an alcoholic. Can you help me? I keep coming back to that. The power of that, the intensity of that honest moment. And it just amazes me, that the first step is key to our recovery. That that we admit we're powerless. But what follows that is what just stuns me, is that when somebody will sit and turn to another human being they don't even know maybe and say, you got to help me. I don't know how to do this. That is holy to me. That is the mystical element in this deal that we do, that we are willing, that is somehow we rise above our egos and all that arrogance, and we realize in some mystical fashion that you cannot save your ass and your face at the same time, and all of a sudden you reach out and you ask another human being to help you. And the immense world that opens up in that moment, talk about a light. I spent a lot of my life in showbiz, and then I walked away from it at a point, and people would say, don't you miss the light? I said, wait a minute, the light I got instead? Do you have any idea of the intensity of the light that I get when I walk into these rooms? When I can walk into a room for a bunch of people I don't know in San Jose and be hugging them feel like I'm hugging cousins and brothers, that's pretty spectacular. My dad would every now and then have it, we call it a father and son bonding moment. They didn't call it bonding then, but what happened is my dad would get very drunk and very sentimental. He was a sweet guy, sweet man, And he'd get me up in the middle of the night to sing for his buddy, Ike McShane. My dad would sit there and he'd drink with his buddy, Ike McShane. Kids would be ushered out of the house and all, then put to bed, and then every now and then my daddy would want me to get up and sing for him. Now, you understand that the last thing Ike McShane needed was to have some gnome singing Danny Boy, So I can still close my eyes and see Ike McShane going, okay, while I sang Danny Boy, I talk about my dad and I talk about Ike McShane because of one very specific incident in my childhood. I was probably 11, 12 years old. My dad got me up in the middle of the night, drunk as a skunk, and it was raining horizontal outside. We were living in Lucasville, Ohio, which is, there's a prison there now, and it's an improvement. It was pretty funky, But my dad got me up in the middle of the night. He said, you know what, my son? We're going to go see the Cleveland Indians play baseball. Take my son to a professional baseball game. We're going to see Cleveland Indians play baseball. He got me out, put me in the back of his car. He had a 50 Merc, black 50 Merc like James Dean drove in Rebel Without a Cause. And I got in the back seat, and he and Ike McShane are in the front seat, and they're passing a bottle back and forth. My dad's going, I'm going, don't watch me, Dad. Watch the road. This is for you Al-Anons out there. I have to tell you that I did this same damn thing. I'll be 71 next Monday. I'm almost 71 years old. I was maybe 11. As a friend of mine says, the over and under on us was 52. So it's amazing work. But I'm almost 71. I can close my eyes and I can see the rain through the windshield wipers, the lights on the road, and the car going all over the road. And I remember thinking, and this is key, I remember thinking that my concentration was holding the car on the road. Now, if you want to take a moment and get a little therapeutic about it, I believe that I've come to I think of the headwaters of my grandiosity. It's so horrible that you're in such danger, you cannot imagine that your parents would do that to you. So you slip into an adjacent room that is powerful, and there's no consciousness of it when it's happening. But all of a sudden, I think that in some ways the alcoholic that I was going to become was born under conditions like that, where you just don't look at how things really are. I didn't scream at my dad, Dad, you're drunk and you're not watching the road. I just went, I can do that. At some level, I was going to keep the car on the road, That's a lot of therapy. I don't know. The therapy hasn't kept me sober, but the therapy has helped me learn to live with some of the things he did and some of the things that I did years later. So my dad drives through the rain to see the Cleveland Indians play baseball, Paulie. He drives to Cincinnati. He drove to the wrong city. Cleveland Indians don't play in Cincinnati, think about it. Isn't that just the perfect alcoholic moment, So we get to town, we get to the ballpark. Pulls in, the ballpark's absolutely empty. This huge stadium, not a soul there, and he's like, "Well, we're early. We're going to get really good seats, And he sits there, and he's having a really quiet conversation with Ike McShane about what the hell is going on here. And eventually he gets out of the car, and he walks to the ticket booth, and he reads the schedule. And I can see him. Through across 60 years, I can see him. And he was wearing brown suit pants, what we now call a wife beater, and slippers. Didn't quite remember to get properly dressed to go to the ball game. And I watched him do what I call the alcoholic slump, and it's like this. It's like, and he began to shrink with the realization that what he'd done it again. And one more time, he had screwed up. You try to do something nice for the kid, and the universe conspires against you. And he walked back to the car, and he said something that I lived by for 49 years. 49 years. My dad said to me at that day in the car, he said, "You know what, kid? Paulie, there's not going to be a ball game, but it's the thought that counts." And for 49 years, I was the thoughtiest little creature that you ever ran into, you know. Well, there was great sense in it. As long as you were thoughty about it, and you didn't have to actually do it, you know. You didn't have to actually finish the work on time. You didn't have to actually be faithful to your wife. You didn't have to actually be careful. You didn't have to actually keep promises. It was the thought that counts. And that lived in me for a lot of years on some level until I found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous. Because what I found there is Jerry saying to me, "You know, it's not that what you're thinking about. That thinking will get you crazy, son. And it's not even what you're feeling about." I'm afraid I'll never get in touch with my feelings again, Jerry. You stay sober long enough, your feelings will get in touch with you, you know. I mean, it's classic AA, but it was brand new to me. Brand new to me. My dad drove his car into the abutment of a bridge drunk one night when I was 13 years old, and I was shipped off to live with an aunt and uncle in Long Beach, California, which is close. Actually, the city I live in now. I live down by Huntington Beach. My home group is in Sunset Beach, but I'm back kind of where this part of my life started. I was shipped off to live with an aunt and uncle in Long Beach. I went to Woodrow Wilson High School, where I graduated in 1958. Now, Woodrow Wilson High School was very difficult for me because I arrive in California where everybody is 6 feet plus. Everybody hits puberty at 9 out here, you know. One of the most difficult things in my life was going into the showers. I had a really slow body clock, you know, which meant that I didn't hit puberty till I was out of high school. So all of a sudden, I mean, I'm going into the showers with these guys, and my body looks like it's made out of cantaloupe, you know. And this is a typical AA pitch, you know. But I swear to God, my first prayer was about that. I said, "God, I don't care how big you make me, just cover me with fur." Be careful what you pray for. I have hair places I don't even like. The tops of my ears don't get cold, Lord, you know. I have an antenna on the side of my nose that just reappears overnight every now and then, you know. It's just, you know, it's the aging process, you know. But everybody was tall. Everybody was hairy and guys and slapping each other on the back and hitting me with a wet towel and all. And everybody had a great tan. What color I have, I got from the light in my refrigerator, you know. So I was this little pink thing running around and suffering. You know what? I had no idea how unhappy or what a horrible childhood I had. Now, that's an interesting thing about an alcoholic. I was sober 5 years before I realized I had a terrible childhood. You know, well, welcome to what we call awake, you know. Yeah, because you get a little time under your belt, you start looking at your life and everything, and all of a sudden the impact of the history begins to flow in and all. So I was sent to live with an aunt and uncle and felt totally different, but never really consciously never felt it. But I look back and I see it. If you wanted to talk to Paul Williams in those days, I would probably tap my watch and do this. Like I had someplace to go. I didn't have any place to go. I didn't know how to talk to you. The one time that I actually felt comfortable is when we would get together, and so we'd go and we'd score a little booze. Had a buddy that worked at a liquor store. We'd give him the money, then we'd take the booze out the back. And that was fine until we decided we'd cut out the part where we give him the money and just take the booze, and they caught him. But that was something in that bonding of, there's a ritual involved. A big part of what we do here is ritual. Joseph Campbell talks about the impact of ritual-based activities on your life and on your growth and the like. So that was a ritual for me to let's go out with my buddies, get drunk, throw up, and be somebody. But there was somewhere in there was something that I connected to on an unconscious level, and I began to drink. And I began to drink, and high school was awful, and I tried to be an actor. I looked like an actor. I looked like a kid. I played kids in the 60s in movies. I looked like a kid until you put me next to a real kid. Then I looked like a kid with a hangover. It was, But I worked for a little while. What eventually, I was somebody that, first of all, I was this tiny little guy, and I just, was raised in a world of belt buckles and bosoms, and I just chose bosoms over belt buckles right away. And so I became a songwriter, and in the 70s, I wrote a lot of codependent anthems that they're basically ouch mommy songs, pick me up and love me songs. And I had an amazing career. I had an amazing career because I concentrated very, very solidly on building that career because I got a lot of attention for it. And it made me feel special instead of different. Special instead of different can be very dangerous. The attention that I got was, it was a party. It was a celebration. And then it wasn't. And then it was me sending somebody else to take the meeting for me while I hid out. And by the end of the 80s, the 70s were incredibly productive and successful years for me. The 80s, you're an alcoholic when you misplace a decade, And I did. The 80s, I just hid out. I hid out. And I don't think I ever would have made it into the rooms, and I don't think that I ever would have even had a shot at recovery if it hadn't been for a young lady. I left my wife. I had 2 amazing children, a great wife, and I was drunk and didn't appreciate it. And I left my wife and my children when I was 46 years old. I had little kids at home. I left them for a 22-year-old psych major. Seemed like the exact thing. Well, she was the one. You talk about the 2 of us made one healthy person, her, It was classic codependent relationship. She'd fart and I'd feel better. That was just the essence of, Did I say that with my outside voice? I did say that, didn't I? That's therapy speak. But you know what? She was an amazing young lady, and she had the courage to do something nobody else had ever done before. She said, you know what? I think you're an alcoholic, and I love you too much to watch you die. So I have to leave. And I went, no, but wait, I was just planning to go to rehab. I was just, funny you should mention, I was thinking of... Perfect. So I went to a place up in Santa Barbara called Schick Shadle. And Schick Shadle is what you call aversion therapy. And let me explain aversion therapy to you if you haven't heard about it or done it. Anybody in the room did aversion therapy? Anybody here? Ooh, grim business. What you do is you go under a little... First of all, they give you a shot to make you sick. And you go, oh, I didn't feel anything. It made me sick. Just wait. You go into a little room, it's a chair with a bowl on the front of it. And I go, what's the bowl for? They said, you'll see. And then they start drinking. What's your favorite drink? Well, by then, of course, it was vodka because you couldn't smell it on me, except when it's coming out of your pores, Birds were falling out of the sky, flying over, Sorry. Not really. But yeah, I thought there was, up to the point that I met this young lady, I thought everybody had a glass of vodka in the shower with them. It seemed like the normal way to start your day, my mind just absolutely, Schick Shadle. So they let you drink whatever you want and you begin to vomit. You get so sick and you sit there and you're in horrible pain with the vomiting and whatever. Then they take a towel, they soak it in that stuff that came out of you, put it around your neck and put you in a room for 3 hours to think about it. It's good medicine, huh? And you know what? Maybe they told me something about 12 steps or whatever, but I never heard it. And the fact is, then every other day, they give you a shot of sodium pentothal, which is the truth serum. Thank you. I knew we would all heard of that. And they give you a shot of sodium pentothal, and they ask you if you want a drink. And they say, if you say, yeah, that's under the truth serum, I want another drink, you go back for more time with the bowl the next day, They said, Mr. Williams, we are very worried about you. I said, why is that? They said, you're always early for the sodium pentothal. Yeah. Are you kidding? Of course I'm early for the sodium pentothal because when you give me that, this goes away. This just goes away. It's just the peripheral vision closes down and you're trying to hang on to it and it's that moment and then you're waking up and it's all behind you and all. But I loved that. And there was a honeymooners one time where Art Carney gives sodium pentothal. He's walking around sleepwalking. They say, we'll give you sodium pentothal, take you back and find out why you're sleepwalking. And he goes, well, this isn't going to work. He says, we'll give you the shot, you count backwards. And he says, well, it's not going to work. 100, 99, 98, 3. My band used to walk on stage with me, and if I was really screwed up, they'd look at me and they'd go, 3. It was a code for how screwed up I'd be. You know. So anyway, I did the time at Chick Shadlin for 7 months. I want a little attention now. For 7 fabulous, will-powered months, I did not have a drink or a toot, and I was charming to be around. Don't be messing with me. I could not drink. Watch this. I'm not drinking. I'm not using. 7 months, boy. And I went to Jamaica to work on a project. I went to Ocho Rios, Jamaica, and I stayed, this is the honest-to-God truth, I stayed up really late writing a song. My brother is also a songwriter, and he wrote a rock and roll anthem called Drift Away. One of my favorite songs ever. Give me the beat, boys. He's also a member of this club. But I've always wanted to write a great rock and roll anthem. That night, I thought I did. I wrote this, I took my place beside you, girl. I knew it. But I don't remember all the words now, but I remember the melody because I got a little sleep and I got up at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I listened to this song that I'd written the night before and I realized that I had rewritten O Little Town of Bethlehem. I took my place beside you, girl. Oh, little town of Bethlehem. Jesus. And at that magical moment, a butler from the place, this beautiful home, came walking by with a tray of ice and glasses and sparkly little bottles, and he went, Mr. Williams, would you like something to drink? Perhaps a rum and coke? And I went, bling. I haven't had a drink in 7 months. I am the Paul Williams. I can handle 1 rum and coke. So 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Ocho Rios, Jamaica in 1987, I think. I had 1 rum and coke. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 1 rum and coke. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I was at Bob Marley's grave explaining reggae to a lot of black people I didn't know. So this is the backbeat. This is the spirit of the thing, I know nothing about reggae. But it is that again. You add alcohol, because alcohol did it. It did it quickly. All of a sudden, I was big enough to deal with the rest of the world, And then you add cocaine. Cocaine made me feel like I could shoot basketball for money. It was just, Yeah. Well, you want to have sex? And in the interest of confusing newcomers, I don't think we should ever let them know what just happened. You'll get it when you're 10, God, just off and running again. And this little young lady that I was living with she was smart, and she was soulful, and she had a great spirit. And she said, "You know what? I think you're using again, and if let's get you some help." Because I don't want to watch you die, and I don't want to leave you, but I can't. I said, what the hell is wrong with you? You have a lot of issues with men, don't you? What did your father do? All this stuff. And you know what? We rise up as alcoholics and addicts. We rise up when somebody's going to take our medicine away from us, and we become huge, and we become powerful and aggressive. And the things that came out of me and the way I spoke to her talk about an amends that will never be fully made as far as I'm concerned. because I look back on my behavior, and I would send her upstairs doubting herself. What greater injury can you give somebody than causing them to doubt their own instincts when their instincts are dead on, flat out? She knew she was right. I was loaded. She could see it. She would go to bed doubting herself. A little girl, like 24 maybe at the time, and I was 46, And I'm doing that to her. You need to know that about me. You need to know that it was not all showbizy, funny, ha-ha, that I also drove with people in the car when I shouldn't. I had a house in Santa Barbara and a house in L.A., and I would go pick my kids up, and I couldn't make it from my house in Santa Barbara to the house in L.A. Excuse me, their house, because I was no longer living there. But I would drive and I couldn't make it that 90 miles without a drink and a toot. And I did exactly as my father did. I would make them look away so they wouldn't have that memory. I'd say things like, "Is that cow on fire?" I mean, my daughter is just got her master's at Smith. She's a master's in social work, highly evolved, a therapist. I know that she's going to wind up on a couch someday going, "Why am I dreaming about burning cows?" It's like... Your daddy did that. Daddy did that. No. But yeah, this little girl would go to bed doubting herself, and now this is important, you know this too. I would sneak out the puppy door to get more booze and drugs. We had a really squeaky front door. Just when you've been up so long, the doorknobs scare you. It's like, you're getting the whips and jangles and those little vision things of like, what was that? Because you haven't slept for 2 days and nights, and that front door was just like, man, God. But I found that I could sneak out on all fours, get down and sneak out the puppy door. I had 2 huskies, and the huskies would watch me, and they would say to each other, husky, "That is up." add the word add in husky. "That is raw." Yeah, he is hard as raw. Eventually, she was gone. Of course, she was gone. I was left to my own devices, and the party was over. There was no party. What my life was reduced to was peeking out the Venetian blinds at 3 a.m, looking for the tree police because I knew they were out there. They'd come to get me. And what happened is eventually as I went to Oklahoma City to play a gig, I had a gig in the afternoon at the university. I think it was the University of Oklahoma. I had been up 2 days and nights. I was taking just a little bit of Antabuse to try to convince her that I wasn't drinking, and I was also using cocaine with the Antabuse. Hadn't slept in probably 2 or 3 days, nights. When I had it was funny, I was in the hotel. It was an afternoon gig, and the promoter came to pick me up. The promoter came in, knocked on the door. I came out. I'm walking along talking to him. As normally, we're having a conversation when it was as if somebody grabbed me and threw me higher than my own head against the wall. He said, I talked to him many times about it since then, but he said, it's as if something actually picked you up and threw you. I was thrown down escalator stairs. My ears were twisted by a monster that I couldn't see. It was like the devil had a hold of me. You know what it was? It was alcohol and cocaine toxicity. And I had a full-blown psychotic episode. I mean a full-blown psychotic episode. One of the members of my band went on stage and said that Paul has had a reaction to his meds. Which is actually what happened, because you got to know that although I didn't have the education to back it up, I know now that the drugs I was abusing were my meds. Because life was just, there's some way that I'm strung together. There's something screwed up in the welding that tells me that this quit working a long time ago, but if I get the right combination in the back of my system again, it's going to work fine. And if it's not, I don't know anything else to do. I went back to L.A. after that episode, and for 2 weeks, and I don't know if it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 9 days, but I think it was around 2 weeks, in a blackout, I called a doctor. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I got to get sober. It was on a Friday night, and the doctor called me on Saturday. He said, well, I found a place for you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you called me yesterday and said you wanted to get sober. I went, somebody's been using my body again. What the hell is that? And then I had that moment of clarity, and and it's, there's an old age saying, keep, Lord, keep your arm on my shoulder and your hand over my mouth. Because just as I was about to say, no, I'm not interested, I started crying. And I went, I really need help. I really need help. And I don't know, it was a miracle that I made the call when I wasn't there. And it was an even bigger miracle that I accepted the help when I did. So I went to this place called New Beginnings. It was September 22nd, 1989. I had my last drink. Incidentally, I changed my date. If you're arguing about this is interesting. I'm a writer who couldn't write. On March 14th, 1990, I took a Valium. I had a big job the next day. We were shooting a little mini-series called People Like Us I was acting in. I had a headache. I couldn't sleep and everything. And my girlfriend at the time, a different girl, said, I've got like a 5-grain Valium. And I said, well, it's not a slip. It's not a slip. I took the Valium. For years, I would argue with, I'm talking like 3 years, arguing with myself about whether or not that was a slip, And it's like, it was Valium. It's a 5-grain Valium. If I dropped it, I wouldn't have picked it up in my old days, But then I realized I never talked to my sponsor about it, and I changed my date. Jerry Hunter was my sponsor, and this is the essence of who he was. I told you about the motorcycle dance and all. He called me up in rehab, and he said, how are you treating the world today, Paulie? I said, you've had a slip of the tongue. He said, no. I said, yeah, you have. Don't you mean how's the world treating me? He said, don't give a rat's ass how the world's treating you, Paulie. And I was stunned. He said, well, I do, because I love you. He said, but I tell you something. If you monitor the way you treat the rest of the world, if you are spiritually vigilant, I promise you everything in your life will get better. And it was the dearest, sweetest, and most truthful thing he'd ever said to me. The fact is that my life did get better. It did get better. I had a moment in rehab when I thought about, that feeling of, I didn't know the expression, I want what you've got, but I had that feeling. And I was watching the way people were changing and the people I was there with, and I'd go to AA, God bless you, I'd go to AA meetings, I'd look around, and I had this horrible feeling that I wasn't going to get it, so I prayed about it. And I prayed in anger. I said, you know what, God? There's something that these people know that I don't know. There's something I don't get. And it was like, damn it, I want it. And I need it now because I can't do this anymore. I don't want to drive with my kids loaded. I don't want to drive loaded in my car with my kids in the car. I don't want to be peeking out the Venetian blinds at 3 a.m. I don't want to be down and at 7 o'clock when the liquor store opens, buying a bottle and saying it's for my brother. I don't want to lie. I don't want to send somebody to my meetings for me. I can't do this anymore. There's something that I don't know, and you have to show me what it is. And I grabbed what I thought was a blank piece of paper to write my first step. And as I held it up to write on it, I noticed there was something printed on the other side. And I turned it over, and for the first time in my life, I read the words, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And God, who writes like that? Who writes things like that? Somebody touched by angels writes things like that. Who comes up with 12 simple steps that will give you a path to undo the damage that you've done to the extent that it can be undamaged? To restore in the way that we get to restore our lives? Who comes up with an idea like that where the worse you tell about who you've been and what you've done, the more you are embraced by your fellow addicts and alcoholics? Who comes up with that? How amazingly fortunate are we? How amazingly fortunate are we? I mean, all I wanted to do was be around recovery. The most important line in the big book to me is the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless you were throwing that at me, I'm fine with it. And I love the program. I love, I get up and go to a meeting every morning. begin to do the work. And the interesting thing about the work for me is that, I was talking about when I changed my date to the actual date, March 15th, 1990, that I was horrifically blocked. I was supposed to write the songs for the Muppet Christmas Carol, and I was like, it was just, there was a block there. There was the beginnings of just nothing coming. And I changed my date, and it poured out of me. The songs aren't any healthier. I'm sorry. I'm still writing those codependent anthems. But that I found that in my life, my windshield gets dirty on the inside. My windshield gets dirty on the inside. Well, all I wanted to do was be around recovery. I didn't really feel connected to the music anymore. I did the job for the Muppets, and that was okay, but I never really felt the passion. What I felt passionate for was this. So I went to UCLA. There was a guy named Buddy Arnold. He started the Musician's Assistance Program. Buddy talked like this. He said, I was the oldest living Jewish junkie, but I had to change, had to give it up. He said, the thing is, and he worked as a program director at Brotman Medical, and he said, musicians are generally underinsured and over-medicated. I think we can find a way to do something for them. So he started the Musician's Assistance Program. He said, you could probably do some good if you went to UCLA and you got your certification as a drug and alcohol counselor, Paulie. So I did that. I spent a year at UCLA, and I entered into what I lovingly refer to as the Paulie Lama period of my life. I am your Paulie Lama. I have come to strike you sober. Come touch the hem, I will get you sober. I was blah, 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 blah. Pulling people off of bar stools, I'm still that way. I can't help it. I meet somebody and I get the whiff of this might be, so I'm just like, in August, I spent a couple weeks in Ireland, and it's like, talk about the headwaters of our disease. It's like, just, my God, you walk by a bar or a pub, and it's like, if there's part of me just wants to go in, not to drink, but to say, I can share a better life with you, because I am the Paulie. Very difficult for me in Ireland. People keep grabbing me going, where'd you hide the gold, you little bastard? So I did the steps, and I eventually started doing the music again, and and got married way too soon, and that was not a good fit, and so we went our separate ways. And then I met the amazing lady that I'm with now. My Mariana and I have been together 10 years. She's a Swedican. She's Swedish and Mexican. You never know which half is going to show up, and if you address the wrong half, God help you. But she loves AA. She's an amazing woman, and my life began to come back together again. I began to sponsor guys. I worked with my sponsor. I did the steps. I did that fifth step. I mean, I had that amazing moment of sitting with him and watching Jerry go, yeah, it's all right. I did that too. It's all right. I did that too. This amazing passage of one person who's gone before you, reaching back to help you, is the most stunning thing I've ever witnessed or been a part of in my life. And I talk about going to my meetings, and I'm sitting there, and I slowly but surely I get calm. And all of a sudden, every now and then I experience what is, I think, the holiest thing in the world. You're sitting there, and there's a guy, and he says, hey, it's Ted, alcoholic. Haven't been here for a while. I got 3 years now, and I just, I haven't been around here, but I got 3 years now, and I can't do this anymore. I got 2 days, and you listen, and you watch this guy all of a sudden make that amazing spiritual choice to be honest with the room. And it makes me cry. I mean, it's the most touching, eloquent, elegant thing we get to see. Because when that person stops bullshitting and leans forward and says, I'm in trouble and I need help and I trust you to help me, there is something that I have never experienced anywhere else. There is, I mean, I get all Jiminy Cricket about this deal. I just, it's just, I watch the love pour into the room for the people around him. And I watch him begin this path, of trusting me, Paulie Williams, trusting me with that piece of their life, this amazing gate, you stand at the beginning of this amazing, amazing journey. And I got to be here, just like somebody was there for me, and hopefully Ted or Bill or Steve or whoever he was, or Carol or Elaine will be there for somebody else. I find that the longer I'm sober, that I'm more convinced that this is a process. You know, there were people that I had no intention to ever make amends to. There were the things I did that I was blatantly wrong, and I knew they were wrong. But then there were things with like, are you kidding? I wouldn't make amends to her for all the money in the world. Are you kidding? Angel, devil. Angel, devil. But you got to know that as you get further and further away from an event, there's less. It's like the further out in space you get, maybe the gravity gets lighter. The further away I get from certain events in my life, the less pull the ego has. And all of a sudden, I find myself in a place where I can see something without the ego, and I can embrace the fact that I've made a horrible mistake and have fought to keep it as it was for far too long. There's a place right between when I'm asleep and I'm awake that is like God's mail slot. It's like I'm almost asleep when all of a sudden I go, I did what? And I remember something. The good news, I know what to do about it now. I know exactly what to do about it. Again, these amazing steps which take us through. Incidentally, the second step is my favorite, and I experience it the moment that I walk up here and turn and look at you, because you know what? Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Imagine all of us together the night before we got sober. You know that Polaroid memory you have of like how I was the worst screwed up I was ever, and I mean, just imagine all of us and combining those nights. You know, we'd change the polarity of the earth. The cops would come. You know, I would of course have realized that your lady wanted to be with me and not you, so I would have begun to plow into that minefield of whatever. But now, so there's a collection of the most irresponsible, crazy, screwed up people in the world. Now, if I may borrow this, because I saw this done at an Al-Anon meeting, if you went out of your way to help somebody this last year, if you took somebody to a meeting, if you showed up and did a commitment, if you went when it was, even though it was really inconvenient, if you did something to help another alcoholic, addict, Al-Anon, raise your hand. Look around yourselves while your hand's up. Take a look. How'd you get so lucky? How'd you get so lucky to turn into that? I cannot explain the process. I can stay in it. I want it for everybody. I wish you could pass it around to everybody. When I was 10 years sober, I went to Nashville to write a song. Right, I actually went down at about 7 years sober, started going to Nashville, writing songs again, and of course going to meetings there. I go to meetings everywhere I go in the world. You know, I go to Japan. I buy my clothes in Japan. In Japan, I'm a medium. So I'm 10 years sober, and I go to speak at the jail, not the prison. I say I went to speak at the prison. It wasn't. It was the jail. I went and spoke. And you know, there's some great recovery in the joint. There's some great recovery in the joint. So I'm speaking to this meeting, and behind bars, and I love it when I hear that thing clang behind me and go, "Thank you, God, for getting me out of there." Because if I spent the night in there, I'd probably come out in high heels. So you know what I mean? It's like. You know, but I go back to the hotel that I'm staying in, and I'm feeling like I am the Polly Lama. It is like, I have shared the message, blah blah Polly this, blah blah that, and I'm just so a spiritual giant, and I go up to my room. And I take that magnetic key that's supposed to work, but this is the third night in a row that the magnetic key hasn't worked. And why the hell should I have to go downstairs one more time? It's like a really quick trip from Gandhi to Himmler for me. I'm like, One moment I'm this little combination of Gandhi and Jiminy Cricket and sort of all about light and love, and then I'm like, where is the bastard? I want to know who's responsible. But we have learned restraint of pen and tongue in these rooms. So when I go downstairs, I'm nice. And the lobby is packed with guys with badges on, and I'm like, working my way. I don't even know who they are, but I want to be in my room. I'm tired. It's been a long day. And I tell the guy, why should I have to come down here 3 nights in a row with these guys? And at a point, there's a tap on my shoulder. And I turn around, there's a guy there with, his name is Gary, and he's got his badge on it that says Oklahoma City. And it's a convention of talent buyers. These are the guys that book talent for state fairs, for performing arts centers, for universities. And he said, I want to just say hi, I'm Gary. I booked you in Oklahoma City a few years back. And I went, oh my God, are you the guy when I lick me, yeah, when I did my Linda Blair, and and he went, yeah, that was me. And I went, well, I'm sober now, I'm 10 years sober, and I just spoke at the prison, blah, 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 Paulie, this, study at UCLA, blah, 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 meetings, blah, 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 and he said, yeah, I heard in the rooms you were sober. This is the best part of my story. This is the best part of my story. He said, I heard in the rooms you were sober. And I went, oh, my God, you be... And my thinking is, of course, because of this ego, I'm like, he just met me and became an alcoholic, Just rubbed up against me, and he caught it, And he reached in his pocket, and he pulled out a chip for 17 years. And I went, oh, my God. And I did the math. I went, he said, I was 7 years sober at the time. And I said, oh, my God. What did you think? He said, oh, I thought you were going to die. He said, I thought you were the saddest little man I ever saw in my life. He said, I was so scared for you, so scared. I said, what'd you do? He said, I called my sponsor. I went, yeah, of course you called your sponsor. What did your sponsor tell you to do? He said, oh, I'll tell you what we did on the spot. We both got on the phone and we started calling alcoholics in Oklahoma. And we got a prayer circle together for you. We prayed that you would get sober, in or out of the rooms. Didn't matter. We don't outline. We just asked for God's help, God's mercy for you. 2 weeks later, in a blackout, I called a doctor. And I'll tell you what's important about that moment for me is at that moment, it all became a gift. That was my spiritual enlightenment at that moment. Because, I always say it's all a gift. My wife says that's what she's going to put on my headstone. Paul, it's all a gift. It's all a gift, Williams. But the fact is, there was a part of me that felt like I'd earned it. There's a part of me that felt like, when I'm asked to speak, I speak. I've sponsored guys, I've worked the steps and all. Some part of me was like, you've earned this deal. And at that moment, I got it that I didn't earn anything. At that moment, I got a level of trust I can't even begin to tell you how immense it is. That I have so little to do with the good in my life. And the only thing I can do to try to keep it going is to pass it forward. Is to stay in action. In this spectacular program. Bill Wilson had a moment of clarity at the beginning of his journey. It took me 10 years. That's how big the ego was. It took me 10 years to realize that I was truly blessed, Absolutely blessed. My life has evolved to 3 simple prayers that cover everything for me. I love Earl H. When Earl talks about when he first got sober, his sponsor said, you're such a mess. I'm not going to even have you try the Serenity Prayer. When you get up in the morning, I want you to look at the heavens and go, whatever. He said, at the end of the day, when you're done, he said, hit your knees one more time, look at the heavens and say, enough, Those are your 2 prayers. Well, I have evolved into my own prayers. I get up in the morning and I say, surprise me, God. Surprise me, God. I'm not afraid of anything God will do for me or that my higher power or this amazing universe can flow into my life. When I was newly sober, I was given the writings of Emmett Fox, and I found a church that kind of worked a very, very similar kind of an energy about goodness and about action that kind of matched up nicely with the beginnings of AA, because before there was a big book they passed around Emmett Fox to read at AA meetings. So I get up in the morning and I say, surprise me, God. It implies complete trust. I never got high enough to see into the future. I tried. I never got high enough to see into the future. But I know that at this moment, when I say, surprise me, God, I'm giving God the reins to my life. You take this pony where you want this pony to go. The other thing I pray is, lead me where you need me. Lead me where you need me. It sounds very altruistic and very, how noblesse oblige? Not at all. Because if I am someplace where I am needed, I begin to feel comfortable. I don't feel like I'm intrusive. If I go to someplace where I'm needed, I actually relax and I begin to listen. When I begin to listen, I can be taught. When I can be taught, I learn something that may be ought to the general good. So if I can tag on this or something better to the highest good of all concerned, to any specific prayer, this or something better to the highest good of all concerned, I let go of that selfish element of the prayer as much as I'm able to. Surprise me, God. Lead me where you need me. And then at the end of the day, thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Mother God. I call him the Big Amigo because I have sponsored a guy in Denver who's always talking about the Big Amigo. That's what he feels like. It's the Big Amigo, you know. A life that I couldn't have imagined. A life that I couldn't have imagined. I work in the music industry, and I'm responsible for a large group of songwriters, composers, authors, and publishers. It's amazing to think that somebody who was peeking out the Venetian blinds at 3 a.m. with nothing but his cocaine and his porn is all of a sudden has a life that is spectacular. The guys in my band say, you know what's weird? I go, what's weird? They go, you being on out of doors. I said, I beg your pardon? They said, it's really weird you being out of doors, because you'd always run from the gig to back to the hotel, and you'd run from the hotel to the car, to the plane, to the bed. He says, we never used to see you. It's really weird to see you out of doors. You know. So I'm out of doors. And I'm 71, almost 71, 2 days away from 71. I feel like a really tired 37. And I think I've found the most marvelous, magical elixir in the world. It's the power and the magnificence and the magic of turning to another alcoholic and say, my name is Paul. How can I be of service? God bless.